In this video, we will learn to factor trinomials of the type ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is greater than 1. Here are the steps. Step 1, factor out the GCF, the greatest common factor. Step 2, make an x factor. Place a times c. A is a coefficient of the x squared, c is a constant. So place the expression a times c on top of the x factor, and b, which is the coefficient of the x, on the bottom. Then you need to find two numbers, n1 and n2, which multiply to be a times c and add to be b. Then we will rewrite the original trinomial ax squared plus bx plus c as ax squared plus n1x plus n2x plus c, and then factor by grouping. Here's an example. Let's factor 3x squared plus 11x minus 20. Start with step 1. Factor out the GCF. Between 3, 11, and negative 20, there is no greatest common factor, so we can skip that step. The second step is to make the x factor and place a, which is a coefficient of the first term, the x squared, and c, which is a constant, 3 times negative 20, let's place that on top, and the middle term, 11, let's place that on the bottom. Now 3 times negative 20 is negative 60, so negative 60 is a number on top of the x factor, and 11 is a number on the bottom of the x factor. Now we need to find two numbers that multiply to negative 60 and that add to positive 11. Since we know these numbers multiply to negative 60, let's list all the factors of negative 60. And because it's a negative 60, we'll have one negative and one positive. So there's negative 1 and 60, there's negative 2 and 30, there's negative 3 and 20, there's negative 4 and 15, there's negative 5 and 12, and negative 6 and 10. So again, it's very important that you go in order when you list the factors of negative 60. Then we want to find the combination that adds to 11. So since negative 4 and 15 add to 11, my n1 and n2 will be negative 4 and 15. Next, we will rewrite 3x squared plus 11x minus 20 as 3x squared. Now the 11x, we're going to split this up as negative 4x and positive 15x minus 20. Notice this is the exact same trinomial, except we split up the 11 as negative 4 and 15. We purposely chose numbers that add to 11 since we would be splitting up the 11. Step 4, factor by grouping. Now I'm going to rearrange these terms because 3x squared and 15x have a more obvious common factor. So I'm going to rearrange these terms as 3x squared plus 15x minus 4x minus 20. The order in which you write these two doesn't matter, so always write it in the most convenient order. Between 3x squared and 15x, our greatest common factor is 3x, and we are left with x minus 5 in the parentheses. Between negative 4x and negative 20, remember that if the first term of the second group is negative, we must also factor out a negative. So we'll factor out a negative 4. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 is 1, so we're left with x, or 1x. Negative 20 divided by negative 4 is 5. We're left with a positive 5. You know you're doing this correctly when these two are the same. Since x plus 5 is a common factor of these two expressions, we will factor out the x plus 5, and we're left with 3x minus 4. Once you're done, always check your answer. So x times 3x, that's 3x squared. X times negative 4, that's a negative 4x. 5 times 3x, that's a positive 15x. 5 times negative 4, that's negative 20. And if we add our two middle terms, that's 3x squared plus 11x minus 20, which is the trinomial we started off with. So we know we did this correctly. Let's look at the next example. Let's factor 5x squared minus 14x plus 8. 5, negative 14, and 8 have no greatest common factor. So let's make the x factor. On top of the x factor, we put a times c. A is a coefficient of the x squared. C is a constant. So a times c is 5 times 8. We put the middle term, the b, on the bottom of the x factor. If I multiply 5 times 8, this gives me 40. And then I still have the negative 14. Now I need to find two numbers that multiply to 40, add to negative 14. So let's list all the factors of 40. Since 40 is positive, we will get two positives or two negatives. But since the 14 is negative, these numbers have to both be negatives. There's -1 and -40. There's -2 and -20. 3 does not go into 40. There's -4 and -10. There's -5 and -8. The factors that add to -14 are -4 and -10. So I will write -4 and -10. Let's verify. Multiply to 40, add to -14. So these are correct. Next, let's rewrite this as 5x squared. The -14x we will rewrite as -4x and -10x plus 8. Now I can leave my terms the way they are, but because 5x squared and -10x have a more obvious common factor, I'm going to rearrange this as 5x squared minus 10x minus 4x plus 8. Between 5x squared and -10x, my greatest common factor is 5x. I'm left with x minus 2. Between -4x and 8, this is my second group. My common factor is 4, but because the first term of the second group is negative, I will also factor out a negative. So -4x divided by -4 is x, 8 divided by -4 is -2. Then I will take out the common factor of x minus 2, so we have x minus 2 times 5x minus 4. And I will leave you to check by multiplying to see if this is correct. Next example, let's factor 6x squared plus 23x plus 20. Between 6, 23, and 20, we have no greatest common factor. So step 1 is done. Step 2, let's make the x factor. On top of the x factor, we will multiply a times c. 6 times 20 is 120. And on the bottom, we will put 23. We need to find two numbers that multiply to be 120 and add to be 23. Now 120 is a large number, so it's very important we once again start with 1. There's 1 and 120, there's 2 and 60, there's 3 and 40, there's 4 and 30, there is 5 and 24, 6 and 20, 7 doesn't go into 120, 8 does, there's 8 and 15, 9 does not go into 120, 10 does, there's 10 and 12, and that's it. Now of these, we need to find the factors that add to be 23. They multiply to be 120, but they must add to 23. That's 8 and 15. So I will put 8 and 15. Multiply to 120, add to 23. Let's rewrite this as 6x squared. The 23x will get rewritten as 8x and 15x plus 20. Now we can leave it like this. We don't have to rearrange because 6 and 15 don't have an obvious common factor, so we can leave it the way it is. Let's factor the first two terms and the second two terms by taking out the GCF. Between 6 and 8, the greatest common factor is 2. Between x squared and x, the greatest common factor is x. If you divide 6x squared by 2x, this gives you 3x. 8x divided by 2x gives you 4. Between 15x and 20, the greatest common factor is 5. 15x divided by 5 is 3x. 20 divided by 5 is 4. There's a common factor of 3x plus 4, which we can factor out. And our answer is 3x plus 4 times 2x plus 5. And once again, I will leave you to check this to verify that it's correct. Okay, finally, let's factor 10x squared minus 34x minus 24. There is a greatest common factor between 10, 34, and 24. We can factor out a 2. So this will leave us with 5x squared. 34 divided by 2, that's 17x. Negative 24 divided by 2, that's negative 12. Okay, now let's use the x factor. On top, we will multiply 5 and negative 12, that's negative 60. On the bottom, we'll put the middle term, which is negative 17. We want to find two numbers that multiply to be negative 60, add to be negative 17, which are negative 20 and 3. If that's not obvious, then we can list factors of negative 60, starting with 1. So there's negative 1 and 60, there's negative 2 and 30, there's negative 3 and 20, there's negative 4 and 15, negative 5 and 12, negative 6 and 10. And of these, the factors that add to 17 are negative 3 and 20. but we will actually want them to add to negative 17, which is why we have to reverse the signs to positive 3 and negative 20. Okay, so let's rewrite this. We have 2 times 5x squared. The negative 17x, we'll rewrite this as negative 20x and positive 3x. Notice that I put the 5x squared and negative 20x in one group because they have an obvious common factor. Now let's factor by grouping. So we will have 2 times. Here, we'll take out a 5x, and we're left with x minus 4. Between 3x and negative 12, we'll take out a 3. We're left with x minus 4. X minus 4 is a common factor, so we have 2 times x minus 4, which is a common factor, times 5x plus 3. And this is the factored form. We have one more example, which we will work on in class.